Little girl knocked, shaking. They took my mom away. What the hell's Angel did shock them. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The rain had been falling steady and cold, turning the gravel driveway into dark mud when the knock came. Not loud but frantic, uneven, like someone did not know whether to beg or to run. The door opened to the glow of a single porch light, and there she was, a little girl no older than elementary school age, shaking so hard her teeth rattled, hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with a fear too old for her small body. She looked up at the towering man in the doorway and forced the words out between shallow breaths. They took my mom away. The biker did not move at first. He stood there, broad and silent, leather vest heavy on his shoulders, the winged patch catching the porch light. Most people in town crossed the street when they saw him. Some locked their doors. This child stepped closer instead, because terror had erased caution. Her sneakers were soaked through. Her knees were scraped. One hand clutched the other so tight her knuckles were white. The biker lowered himself slowly, careful not to startle her, the way one might approach a wounded animal. He did not ask her name. He did not ask questions yet. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, the leather warm from his body, smelling of oil and road dust. She flinched at first, then froze, then leaned into it without realizing she had done so. His voice came out low and steady, practiced calm from years when panic meant people died. You are safe here. Take a breath with me. Outside, the rain kept falling, drumming on the roof like a ticking clock. Inside, the girl tried to speak again. Her words came broken, scattered. A black van. No markings. Men who did not sound like police. Her mother telling her to run, to remember the address on a matchbook, to knock on the door with the eagle wings. The biker felt something tighten behind his ribs. That matchbook had been his, handed out years ago at a roadside bar he no longer visited. He glanced down the empty street, instinct measuring distance, time, risk. Whoever took her mother had planned it. This was not random. He ushered the girl inside, closing the door with quiet finality. The house was sparse, clean, built for one man who slept light. He sat her at the kitchen table, wrapped her hands around a mug of warm water because she was shaking too hard for anything else. He crouched in front of her again, eye level now. You did the right thing. You came to me. Somewhere far off, an engine passed, then another. The biker reached for his phone, but did not dial yet. First he listened to the sound of her breathing slow, because before anything else, the child needed to believe the world had stopped falling apart. Only then did he look toward the window, jaw set, already deciding that whoever had taken her mother had made a very serious mistake. The girl sat very still at the kitchen table, wrapped in the heavy leather jacket that nearly swallowed her small frame, her feet not quite reaching the floor, her eyes tracking every sound in the quiet house. The biker moved with deliberate calm, filling the kettle at the sink, keeping his back turned just enough to give her space while still watching her reflection in the dark window. He asked her name gently, and when she said Lily, her voice barely above a whisper, he repeated it once, slow and steady, as if anchoring it to the room. He asked her age, and she told him she was 7, then pressed her lips together as if afraid saying more might make something else disappear. He slid a plate of crackers across the table, not pushing, not insisting, just placing them within reach, and she stared at them for a long moment before taking one careful bite. As she ate, the words began to come, not in a rush, but in fragments that spilled out whenever the shaking eased enough to let them through. She talked about the apartment with the blue door, about how her mother worked nights at the diner off the highway, about how the van had pulled up just after sunset while they were still in the parking lot. She said the men did not wear uniforms and did not show badges, but they spoke with calm voices that made her mother tense instead of relieved. She said her mother had squeezed her hand hard and told her to remember the address written on the matchbook and to run when she said run. Lily swallowed and looked down at the table when she said she had run, that she had not looked back until her legs burned and her chest hurt, and the rain soaked through her sweatshirt. The biker listened without interrupting, filing away every detail, the color of the van, the direction it turned, the way the men spoke. None of it sounded like law enforcement. All of it sounded planned. He asked her one more thing, the hardest thing, and did it carefully, asking if anyone had been hurt. Lily shook her head quickly, then hesitated, then said she did not know, that her mother had tried to stay calm, that she had told Lily everything would be okay even though her eyes said something else. The biker felt the familiar weight settle over him, the one that came when someone else needed help and there was no one official to call who would move fast enough. He stood and walked to the hallway, opening a drawer that held an old paper map and a notebook filled with names and numbers he hoped he would never need again. He did not call anyone yet. He checked the clock, noting the time, measuring how far a black van could get in that many minutes. He returned to the kitchen and crouched again in front of Lily, his voice steady, his eyes level with hers. He told her she was brave. He told her she had done exactly what her mother asked. He told her that for now, her job was to stay here, to drink some water, to keep warm, and to rest, because adults would handle the rest. She nodded, trusting him in the way only children who have run out of options can. Outside, the rain began to ease, leaving the night quiet and expectant. The biker rose and reached for his phone, stepping just far enough away that Lily could not hear the low tones of his voice. He did not say much, only a location, a description, and a simple request for eyes on the road leading out of town. When he ended the call, he stood still for a moment, shoulders squared, then returned to the kitchen. Lily had finished the crackers and was fighting sleep, her head dipping forward before snapping back up. He draped a blanket around her and guided her to the couch, sitting at the far end so she would not feel crowded. As her eyes finally closed, he kept watch, listening to the house, to the street, to the quiet promise that this was only the beginning, and that somewhere not far away, a line had just been crossed that could not be uncrossed. The house stayed quiet as the rain faded into a distant whisper, and the biker remained awake while the child slept, his body still but his mind working through every detail Lily had shared. He sat in the chair closest to the front window, boots planted on the floor, hands resting on his knees, eyes moving from the dark street to the reflection of the small shape on the couch. Years ago he had learned that the moment you relaxed was the moment trouble found you. He did not pace. He did not fidget. He simply watched and listened, counting the seconds between passing headlights, measuring how normal the night sounded, how wrong it felt. Lily shifted in her sleep, murmuring something he could not make out, and he stood slowly, careful not to make the floor creak. He adjusted the blanket so it covered her shoulders, then stepped back, keeping his distance, making sure she still had space to breathe. That was when he heard it. Tires. Not speeding. Not idling either. Rolling slowed down the street, then slowing more. His jaw tightened. He moved to the door and killed the porch light, leaving the inside dim, the house suddenly invisible from the road. He looked through the narrow gap in the curtain and saw a dark vehicle pass once, then turn at the end of the block. It did not belong here. He felt the old instinct rise, the one that told him danger did not announce itself. He glanced back at Lily and then at the hallway, calculating what he would do if the door was tested, if voices called out, if someone demanded to see inside. He reached for his jacket, but did not put it on. He did not need it yet. He needed his hands free. The vehicle did not return. Minutes passed, then more. The biker exhaled slowly, not in relief, but in preparation. He knew this was not over. Whoever had taken a woman in a marked neighborhood with no uniforms had not done it to disappear quietly. They would be checking loose ends. He moved to the kitchen and wrote the address of the Blue Door apartment on a scrap of paper, adding the name of the diner Lily mentioned, sketching the route in his head. He poured himself a cup of coffee and did not drink it, letting the heat warm his palms instead. As the night edged closer to morning, Lily woke again, sitting up too fast, eyes wide, breathing quick. He was at her side in 2 steps, not touching, just close enough that she could see him. It is okay. You are safe. She looked around, confused for a moment, then remembered, her face tightening. Are they coming here? He shook his head once. No, not tonight. He did not lie to her. He simply meant it for this moment. She asked if her mother would find her here. He told her yes, because he intended to make it true. He gave her water and waited until her breathing slowed again. Dawn crept in pale and gray through the windows, and with it came the sounds of the town waking up, doors opening, engine starting, life pretending nothing had happened. The biker stood and stretched his shoulders, the decision already made. He told Lily that a friend was coming by to sit with her for a while, someone kind, someone who knew how to make pancakes and keep secrets. He did not tell her where he was going. Children did not need that wait. When the knock came, soft and familiar, he answered it quickly, speaking low to the woman on the porch, handing her the scrap of paper and a few quiet instructions. Then he returned to Lily, knelt in front of her again, and looked her in the eyes. "You did your job. Now I do mine." She nodded, trusting him without hesitation, and that trust settled on him heavier than any patch he had ever worn. He stepped outside as the sun broke through the clouds, the quiet street looking harmless in daylight, and started his motorcycle, the engine rumbling to life with a promise that the night was not finished yet. The ride through town was short but heavy, the biker keeping his speed steady as morning traffic thinned and the familiar streets gave way to quieter roads. His thoughts split between the address on the paper and the image of Lily shrinking back when he had first opened the door. He knew that fear well, the kind that did not care about intentions, only appearances, and by the time he reached the edge of town, he was already replaying her flinch, her eyes darting to his hands as if expecting them to grab instead of protect. When he returned to the house later that morning, the sun higher now and the air warming, he found Lily awake again, sitting stiff on the couch beside the woman he had asked to watch her, her small hands clenched in her lap, her eyes following his every movement with attention that had not been there before. The night adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind questions and the creeping worry that she had traded one danger for another. He stopped several steps away, keeping his hands visible, lowering himself slowly into the chair across from her, instead of towering over her. She did not smile. She did not speak. She leaned slightly toward the other woman, instinctively seeking the nearest safe shape. The biker felt the sting of it, but accepted it without protest. Trust was not owed. It was earned. Lily finally spoke, her voice quiet but sharp with fear, asking if he was going to make her leave, asking if he was one of them, the ones who took people away in vans. The words hit harder than any accusation from an adult ever could. He shook his head once, slow and deliberate, and told her no, that he would not take her anywhere she did not want to go. She asked why he wore the vest, why people looked scared of him, why her mother had told her to knock on his door if something bad happened. He listened to every question without interrupting, letting the silence stretch so she would know he was not trying to rush her into calm. When he spoke, he chose his words carefully, explaining that sometimes grown men made choices that put them in places where people learned the wrong things about them, that his clothes and his bike did not decide what he did with his hands or his heart. Lily watched him closely, her body still tense, her eyes flicking to the door, to the window, to his boots. She told him she did not like loud engines, that the sound reminded her of the van. He nodded and told her he would not start the bike while she was near it. He told her she could stay where she was, that no one would force her to go anywhere today. Still, the fear lingered, a quiet wall between them. She asked if he knew where her mother was. He did not lie. He told her he did not yet, and her shoulders tightened as if she had expected that answer and dreaded it all the same. She asked if he would call the police. He paused, then told her he would do what helped her mother come home safely, that sometimes that meant waiting before involving people who asked many questions and moved too slowly. The other woman shifted, uneasy, but Lily seemed to understand the hesitation in a way that surprised everyone in the room. She looked down and said her mother had told her not everyone with a badge helped right away. The biker nodded, feeling a grim respect for the woman he had never met. Lily stood suddenly, backing away a step, panic flaring as if she had realized all at once how small she was in a house that was not hers. He stayed seated, did not reach for her, did not tell her to calm down. He simply spoke, steady and low, telling her she could see the door from where she stood, that it was unlocked, that she was not trapped. After a long moment, she stopped retreating. She did not come closer either. The distance remained, fragile but intact. The biker accepted that as progress. Fear did not vanish just because danger paused. It softened only when given time and proof. He promised her one thing only, that while she was under his roof, no one would take her without his say, and he said it plainly, without bravado, letting the weight of the promise speak for itself as Lily watched him, measuring the truth of it in his stillness. By the time afternoon settled in, the tension inside the house had shifted from sharp fear to a quieter unease, the kind that lingered in the corners and watched every movement. The biker understood this phase well. It was the moment when survival stopped screaming and started asking questions. He did not try to fill the silence with reassurance. Instead, he focused on small, ordinary actions, the kind that proved safety better than promises. He washed dishes slowly where Lily could see him, the sound of water steady and unthreatening. He moved furniture just enough to open the living space, giving her clear lines of sight to the door and the windows. He kept his voice low when he spoke to the woman helping him, never letting frustration rise. Lily watched all of it from her spot on the couch, her body still guarded, but her eyes less frantic now, more curious than afraid. When hunger finally overcame tension, she admitted softly that her stomach hurt. He nodded and asked what she liked to eat, not what she was allowed, not what was healthy, but what felt normal. She hesitated, then said grilled cheese, the way children do when they are testing whether wanting something simple is still allowed. He made it without hurry, cutting it into small squares and setting the plate on the table between them before stepping back again. She waited, studying his hands, then took one piece, then another. The first real sign of trust came not in words, but in the way she relaxed her shoulders as she ate. Afterward, she asked if she could wash her face. He showed her the bathroom and stood outside the door, turning away completely, giving her privacy without announcing it. When she returned, cleaner and calmer, she sat closer than before, not beside him, but nearer than the far edge of the couch. He accepted that too. Trust did not arrive all at once. It came in inches. As the afternoon light shifted, Lily began to talk again, this time without being prompted. She told him about her mother laughing too loud at bad jokes, about how they counted cars in the diner parking lot to pass time, about how her mother always held her hand when crossing the street, even though Lily said she was big enough. The biker listened, absorbing not just the facts but the shape of the woman behind them. This was not someone who disappeared by accident. When Lily finally asked why he was helping her, the question landed softly but carried weight. He did not give her a heroic answer. He told her that once, a long time ago, someone had needed help and he had been too slow, too angry, too convinced it was not his problem. He told her that when people did nothing, bad things had more room to grow. Lily considered this, her brow furrowing in concentration. Then she asked if he was angry now. He shook his head and told her no, that he was focused. That seemed to satisfy her. Evening crept closer, and with it came the subtle signs that Lily was tiring again. Her words slowed. Her eyelids drooped. He brought out paper and colored pencils he kept for visiting relatives and placed them on the table without comment. She drew quietly, the scratch of pencil filling the room, and when she finished, she pushed the paper toward him. It was a simple drawing, a house, a stick figure girl, and a larger figure beside her. He did not ask which was which. He simply said it was good and meant it. Outside, a vehicle passed, and Lily stiffened, fear flashing back across her face. The biker did not move toward the window. He stayed where he was and spoke calmly, naming the sound for what it was, a neighbor going home, nothing more. He waited until her breathing slowed again. As night approached, he laid out a blanket and pillow on the couch, making the space comfortable without making it feel permanent. He told her she could sleep there or in the chair if she preferred. She chose the couch. Before turning off the lights, she asked him one more thing, her voice small but steady, asking if he would still be there when she woke up. He met her eyes and answered simply that he would not go anywhere. He did not say forever. He did not say everything would be fine. He said only what he knew he could keep. Lily closed her eyes, the day finally catching up with her, and the biker took his place in the chair nearby, settling in for another long watch, knowing that this fragile calm was not an ending but a bridge to whatever came next. The night settled deep and quiet again, and while Lily slept with one hand curled into the edge of the blanket, the biker stayed awake and let his thoughts drift somewhere he usually kept locked down tight. He had not planned to remember the past, but the way the child trusted him in pieces had opened a door he had avoided for years. He stared at the dark window and saw another night layered over this one a long time ago, when he had been younger, heavier with anger, and convinced that strength meant never slowing down. Back then he had been riding hard through a different town, chasing noise and loyalty and a reputation that kept him moving so he would not have to feel the weight of anything real. That was the night he heard crying behind a closed grocery store long after midnight, and told himself it was none of his business. He remembered how he had rolled past without stopping because stopping meant questions, and questions meant weakness. He remembered telling himself that someone else would handle it. Someone always did in his mind. He learned the truth the next day when the news spread quietly that a woman had been found hurt badly and her child taken into care because there was no one left to take her home. The biker had never known their names, but the image stayed with him, a small shape on a cold sidewalk that he could not shake no matter how far he rode. That was the night something inside him broke and hardened at the same time. He told himself it would never happen again, yet years passed, and he buried that promise under work and noise and motion. Sitting there now with Lily breathing slow and steady, he felt the echo of that old failure pressing against his ribs. He realized this was not chance or coincidence, but a test he had already failed once and been given again without warning. The house creaked softly as it cooled, and the biker rose quietly and walked to the kitchen where the light from the stove clock glowed faintly. He placed his hands flat on the counter and breathed until the tightness eased. This time he would not ride past. This time he would not assume someone else would step in. He returned to the living room and sat closer to the couch, not touching, but near enough that if Lily stirred, she would see him first. She shifted in her sleep and whispered something that sounded like her mother's name, and he answered softly that she was not alone. He did not promise more than that. Morning came slow and gray, and with it Lily woke again, her eyes searching the room before settling on him. The fear did not rush back the way it had before. Instead, there was a question there, a quiet one, asking if he was still the same man she had met in the storm or if daylight would change him. He nodded once and offered her water and a slice of toast. She ate without hesitation and asked if he had children. He told her no and felt the truth of it in a new way. She nodded as if that explained something, and then asked if he was scared last night. He considered lying, but chose honesty, and said yes, he had been scared of not being fast enough. Lily accepted this with the seriousness children reserve for things that matter, and told him she was scared too, but that it felt smaller now. He felt something loosen in his chest at that. Outside, the day went on with people heading to work and school, and none of them knowing what line had been drawn inside this quiet house. The biker knew the calm would not last, and that what came next would demand more than patience and kindness. It would demand action and resolve, and the willingness to stand in front of something ugly without looking away. He watched Lily finish her breakfast and draw another picture at the table, and he understood that this time the past would not decide the ending. This time he would. Morning had barely settled when the first sign that everything was moving faster than expected revealed itself, and it came quietly, not with sirens or shouting, but with a small detail that most people would have ignored. The biker stood at the kitchen counter rinsing a cup when his phone vibrated once against the wood and then went still. He did not reach for it right away. He waited, counted his breath, and glanced toward Lily, who was sitting on the floor with her drawing pad legs tucked under her body the way children did when they felt safe enough to forget about escape routes. Only when she was fully absorbed did he pick up the phone and read the message. It was short and careful, and it changed everything. The van had been spotted again, not leaving town as expected, but parked behind an abandoned feed warehouse less than 10 miles away, the same warehouse locals avoided because nothing good ever stayed there long. More troubling was the detail that followed. 2 vehicles were seen, not one, and neither carried plates that matched anything on record. This was not a grab meant to disappear into distance. This was a hold. The biker felt the familiar tightening in his chest the moment when planning shifted into urgency. He looked up and caught Lily watching him. Children always knew when the air changed. She stood slowly, clutching her pad to her chest, and asked if something bad was happening again. He did not lie and did not alarm her. He told her that something important had come up and that he needed to make sure she stayed with the woman who had come to help. Lily frowned and asked if that meant he was leaving. He knelt so they were level again and told her yes, but only to bring her mother back. She asked how long. He told her he did not know, but that he would come back as soon as he could. She nodded, but her fingers tightened around the paper until it crumpled. The biker noticed and gently smoothed it flat, setting it on the table and telling her she could keep drawing while he handled grown-up problems. She accepted this with a small nod, though the worry did not fully leave her eyes. He moved quickly now, but not recklessly, grabbing his jacket keys and the notebook from the drawer. He spoke quietly with the woman, giving her clear instructions about doors, phones, and what to do if anyone came asking questions. No one was to open the door for strangers, not even friendly ones. Lily listened, pretending not to but absorbing every word. As he reached the door, she called out his name for the first time, her voice steady but thin. He turned, and she asked if the men who took her mother were police, pretending. The question landed heavier than she knew. He chose his words carefully and told her that sometimes people pretended to be things they were not, and that was why it was important to pay attention to how they acted, not just what they said. Lily nodded slowly and said her mother had looked scared when she saw them, and that police never made her mother scared like that. The biker felt a grim confirmation settle in his gut. He told Lily she was very smart and that she had noticed something important. Then he left, stepping into daylight that suddenly felt too bright for what waited ahead. The ride to the edge of town was fast, but controlled, his eyes scanning mirrors and side streets, every instinct alert. When he reached the old warehouse, he did not pull in. He circled once instead, counting entrances, noting broken fences, fresh tire tracks, and the way one door hung slightly open, as if someone had gone through recently, without caring who noticed. This was the twist that hardened his resolve. Whoever had taken the woman was not hiding from attention anymore. They were either careless or confident, and both meant danger. He parked out of sight and shut off the engine, listening to the quiet hum of the building, the distant sound of traffic, and something else, a low mechanical noise like a generator running inside. That meant people were there now, not later, not gone. Time tightened around him. He knew that calling official help now would mean delays, explanations, and a risk that Lily's mother would be moved before anyone arrived. He reached into his pocket and sent one more message, short and clear, telling his contact where he was, and that if he did not check in soon, something had gone wrong. Then he squared his shoulders and started toward the warehouse on foot, knowing that the moment he crossed that distance there would be no clean way back, only forward into whatever waited, and hoping that Lily would never have to know how close everything came to breaking apart. The inside of the warehouse smelled of dust, oil, and old grain, and the biker moved slowly along the wall, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light filtering through high, dirty windows. The low mechanical hum he had heard outside came from a generator near the center of the building, its steady vibration echoing through the metal beams like a heartbeat. He stayed in shadow, counting footsteps, voices, and the distance between cover points, the way he had learned long ago when hesitation cost more than bruises. He heard two men talking near a stack of crates, their voices casual, which told him they did not expect trouble. That confidence confirmed what he already suspected. Whoever planned this did not think anyone would come looking fast enough to matter. He edged closer and caught fragments of conversation enough to know the woman was still here and that she was being held, not hurt, but frightened into cooperation. The biker felt his jaw tighten at the familiar tactic, and for a brief moment a memory cut through his focus, the sound of a child crying in a place no one wanted to notice. He pushed it aside and kept moving. He spotted a small office built from plywood near the back, its door closed, light glowing faintly beneath the frame. That was where the generator cables ran, and that was where the woman would be. As he approached, he heard a voice inside, steady but strained, a woman's voice trying to sound calm for her own sake. Without thinking, he whispered her name, the one Lily had said in passing earlier, and the voice stopped short. There was a pause, then a quiet answer asking who was there. He did not give his name, only said that her daughter was safe and waiting for her. The silence that followed was heavy, and then he heard a sharp breath, like someone fighting tears. That was the moment the biker knew he would not leave without her. The door creaked as it opened from the inside, and he saw the woman standing there, pale but upright, her eyes wide with disbelief. She took one step toward him, then froze as footsteps approached from behind. The biker moved instantly, placing himself between her and the sound, his body filling the doorway, his presence unmistakable. The men stopped short, surprised, not frightened yet, and one of them asked what he thought he was doing here. The biker did not raise his voice. He told them this was over and that the woman was leaving with him. One of the men laughed, the wrong kind of laugh, and said he did not understand how things worked. The biker did not argue. He took one step forward, and the laugh died. In that moment, something shifted, the kind of unspoken recognition that came when people realized the balance had changed. The second man reached toward his pocket, and the biker was already moving, not to strike, but to disarm, his hand snapping out with practiced precision. The generator roared louder, as if responding to the sudden tension, and the woman flinched behind him. The first man backed away, cursing under his breath, and the biker held his ground long enough for the message to land. This was not a negotiation. He ushered the woman toward the side exit, keeping his body angled to block any follow-up. They moved quickly through the shadows and out into the daylight, where the air felt sharp and clean compared to the stale warehouse. The woman staggered once, and he steadied her without hesitation, his grip firm and reassuring. She asked about Lily, her voice breaking, and he told her she was safe, warm, and waiting. They reached his motorcycle, and he paused only long enough to consider the risk, then made the decision to take the longer route back, avoiding main roads and places where anyone might follow. The ride was tense, the woman holding on tightly, but not in panic, more in relief that finally had somewhere to go. As they neared town, the biker spotted a vehicle in the distance matching the one described earlier, moving in the opposite direction, and he knew then that the window to act had been smaller than anyone realized. He did not slow. When he pulled into his driveway, the woman dismounted shakily, and then saw Lily standing in the doorway, her eyes lighting up before she ran forward, stopping short, as if afraid it was not real. The woman dropped to her knees, and Lily rushed into her arms, the sound that escaped her something between laughter and sobs. The biker stood back, giving them space, his chest tight, with a feeling he did not name. Lily looked up at him over her mother's shoulder, and for the first time smiled without fear, and in that moment the weight of every choice he had made pressed down on him, heavy, but right. The danger was not gone, he knew that, but the connection forged. In fear and courage now bound them together, and whatever came next would be faced not alone, but as something closer to a family than any of them had expected. The reunion inside the house did not erase the danger, it only shifted its shape, and the biker felt it, even as Lily clung to her mother, refusing to let go. He watched the woman carefully as she held her child, her hands still shaking, her eyes scanning the room, as if expecting the walls to fall away. He guided them both inside and closed the door, locking it with a deliberate click that sounded louder than it should have. The woman thanked him in a rush of breathless words, but he lifted a hand gently, not to stop her gratitude, but to steady the moment. "First we breathe," he said quietly, and they did. He ushered them to the kitchen table and set out water, his movements calm and practiced, because calm was contagious. Lily sat pressed against her mother's side, her head tucked under her chin, and for a brief moment the world narrowed to that simple picture of safety reclaimed. Then the biker phone vibrated again. He did not answer immediately. He waited, listening for engines outside, for footsteps on gravel, for any sign that the men from the warehouse had decided to follow. Nothing yet, but the message could not wait. He stepped into the hallway just far enough to speak without alarming Lily and read the update. A vehicle had been seen leaving the warehouse area at speed, another circling the back roads. That meant questions would follow. He returned to the kitchen and spoke plainly to the woman, telling her they needed to prepare for the next hour, not the next day. She nodded, understanding without panic, because fear had already spent itself. He asked about injuries, and she said she was shaken but unharmed, that they had threatened paperwork and consequences, not pain. He told her that was important and that it meant time was still on their side if they used it well. He asked if she trusted him to call for help, and she hesitated only a moment before saying yes, but not the local number, not yet. He nodded because he had already made that calculation. He stepped outside and made the call he had avoided earlier, not to authorities, but to a contact who owed him a favor, a man who understood discretion and speed. He gave the address, the situation, and the need for eyes and distance, not lights and sirens. When he hung up, he stood still for a breath, and then returned inside to Lily, watching him with fierce attention. She asked if they were going to be taken again, and he knelt and told her no, that this time the grown-ups were putting a fence around the problem. She asked if she could help, and he smiled softly, telling her that helping meant staying close to her mother and being brave enough to rest. She considered this seriously, and then nodded, curling back into her mother's arms. The woman reached for his hand, briefly squeezing it with a strength that surprised him, and said she had known the moment she saw his door open that night that this was not the end for them. He did not answer because words would only cheapen the truth of it. Outside, a car slowed at the end of the street, then moved on. He noted the sound, the timing, the direction. He gathered documents from the woman that could prove who she was and where she worked, things that would matter soon. He placed them neatly on the counter, turning chaos into order one step at a time. Minutes passed, then more. Finally, another engine approached and stopped, not with aggression but with purpose. The biker opened the door and spoke briefly with the man who arrived, exchanging information without ceremony. They agreed on next steps that involved distance and visibility, not confrontation. When the door closed again, the woman exhaled a long breath she had been holding since the night before. Lily looked up and asked if it was over. The biker answered honestly that the hardest part was, but that they would need to stay alert a little longer. Lily accepted this with a tired nod, her strength finally ebbing. He prepared a place for them to rest together and watched as mother and child lay down side by side, hands clasped, as if afraid sleep might separate them. He stood guard nearby, listening to the house and the street, knowing that the danger had not vanished, but that for now it had been pushed back far enough to let healing begin. The hours after, nightfall stretched long and uneasy, and even though the house appeared calm, the biker knew that danger rarely announced its return with noise. He stayed alert as the woman and the child slept together on the couch, their breathing finally deep and even. Outside, the street remained quiet, but quiet could be misleading. He checked the locks again and turned off unnecessary lights, leaving only a soft glow from the kitchen so shadows would not surprise anyone waking suddenly. Near midnight, his phone vibrated once more, and this time, he answered, stepping just outside the back door where his voice would not carry. The contact spoke quickly, explaining that the men from the warehouse had realized the situation had slipped out of their control and that they were trying to shift blame by claiming a misunderstanding. That meant questions would soon arrive from people who asked them officially, and that pressure would come next. The biker listened without interrupting, already anticipating the path this would take. He thanked the contact and ended the call, then stood still for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision forming inside him. He returned inside and sat at the table, staring at the papers the woman had given him earlier. There was a narrow window now where the truth could be placed in front of the right people before it was buried under confusion and fear. When the woman woke later and came quietly into the kitchen, he told her what he knew and what was coming. She listened closely, her face tired but resolute, and said she was ready to speak to anyone who would listen if it meant protecting her child. Lily followed shortly after, rubbing her eyes, and seeing the tension in the room, she grew still again, watching both adults carefully. The biker knelt and told her that things might feel strange soon because new people might ask questions, but that she had done nothing wrong, and that the most important thing was to stay close to her mother and tell the truth as she remembered it. Lily nodded solemnly and asked if the bad men would be angry. He told her they might be, but that anger did not decide what happened next. Honesty did. She accepted this with a small nod, showing a strength that surprised everyone. As dawn approached, there was a knock at the door. Firm but not aggressive. The biker opened it to find two men dressed plainly, their manner careful, respectful. He recognized the look of people who had already been briefed and were choosing their words with intention. He stepped aside, allowing them to enter, keeping himself between them and the family until the tone was set. The conversation unfolded slowly and deliberately, with no raised voices and no sudden movements. The woman spoke clearly, answering questions while Lily stayed tucked against her side, listening. The biker filled in details when asked, keeping his account factual and measured. Hours passed like this, the air slowly easing as understanding replaced suspicion. By late morning, it was clear that the story would not be ignored or dismissed. The men thanked them and left with assurances that protection would be provided and that the people responsible would be dealt with through proper channels. When the door closed behind them, the woman sank into a chair, exhausted and relieved in equal measure. Lily looked around and asked if it was finished now. The biker answered that the worst part was, but that healing would take time. Lily seemed satisfied with that answer and yawned, climbing back onto the couch. The woman looked at the biker with gratitude and something deeper and asked him what would have happened if Lily had knocked on another door that night. He did not answer right away, then said simply that it would not matter now because she had knocked on the right one. Outside, the day carried on as if nothing had changed, but inside the house a quiet shift had taken place. The biker felt it in the way Lily no longer flinched at his movements, and in the way the woman finally allowed herself to sit without scanning every sound. He knew his role in their lives was changing from guardian to something less defined, but no less important. As the sun climbed higher, he made breakfast for all of them, and for the first time since the storm, the house felt like a place where ordinary life might return, even if it would never be quite the same again. The afternoon settled into a softer rhythm, and for the first time since the storm night, the house felt less like a shelter and more like a place where life could breathe again. Lily sat at the table, coloring quietly while her mother rested on the couch, her eyes closed, but her hand still reaching out to touch her daughter's ankle every few minutes, as if confirming she was real. The biker moved through the kitchen slowly, making soup from whatever he had on hand, the simple routine, grounding him more than he expected. When the pot began to steam, Lily looked up and asked if she could help. He handed her a spoon and showed her how to stir carefully, keeping distance from the heat, and she took the task seriously, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. Her mother watched this from the couch, and something in her expression shifted from guarded gratitude to something warmer, more human. When the soup was ready, they sat together at the table, not speaking much, because words felt unnecessary. The simple act of sharing food did more than any reassurance could have. Afterward, Lily grew quiet again, her energy spent, and her mother guided her back to the couch, tucking her in with practiced tenderness. The biker stood nearby, unsure where to place himself now that the immediate danger had passed. Lily looked up at him and patted the space beside her without thinking. He hesitated, then sat carefully, keeping his hands folded in his lap. Lily leaned against his arm for a moment, then relaxed fully, as if deciding he was solid enough to rest on. He felt his throat tighten unexpectedly and stared at the far wall until the feeling passed. Her mother watched them, both her eyes bright with unshed tears, and said softly that Lily had not leaned against anyone like that since her father left years ago. The biker nodded, unsure how to respond to that kind of truth. Lily fell asleep again, this time, without flinching at passing sounds, and her breathing deepened into the steady rhythm of real rest. The biker remained still, afraid that moving might break the fragile peace. When her mother finally spoke again, she thanked him not just for what he had done, but for how he had done it without asking for anything, without making promises he could not keep. He shrugged and said it was what anyone should do, but she shook her head and said not everyone did. She asked him why he had chosen to open the door that night, and he told her about the grocery store, the crying he had ignored years ago, and the promise he had made to himself afterward. He admitted that when Lily knocked, he had seen a chance to keep that promise at last. The woman listened quietly, then said that maybe Lily had been sent to the right door, because both of them needed the same thing. The biker did not argue. As evening approached, arrangements were made for the mother and child to stay elsewhere, temporarily, somewhere safer with more eyes and support. The thought of them leaving stirred an unexpected heaviness in his chest. Lily woke and listened as her mother explained that they would be going somewhere new for a little while. She accepted this calmly, then looked at the biker and asked if she could come back and visit. He smiled and told her his door would be open whenever she needed it. She nodded, satisfied, and reached into her backpack, pulling out the first drawing she had made at his table. It was creased and smudged, but she smoothed it carefully and handed it to him. He took it with reverence, folding it once and placing it in his jacket pocket. When it was time to go, Lily hugged him suddenly, fiercely, her arms tight around his waist, and he froze for a moment, then returned the hug, gently, mindful of her sighs. Her mother thanked him again, this time with a steadier voice, and said she would never forget what he had given them. He watched as they walked down the path together, Lily turning once to wave before disappearing around the corner. The house felt quieter after they left, but not empty. The biker sat alone for a long time, holding the drawing in his hand, understanding that whatever came next in his life would be shaped by this moment, not by the roads he had ridden before. He had not just saved a family, he had found a piece of himself he thought was gone forever, and that realization settled over him, heavy and undeniable. The days that followed moved more quietly, but the weight of what had happened did not lift. It settled deeper and demanded a choice the biker could no longer delay. He rode alone that evening along the back roads outside town, the engine steady beneath him, the sky stretching wide and pale as the sun dipped low. The warehouse stood silent, now cordoned off by distance and rumor, but the knowledge of what had almost happened there stayed sharp in his mind. He thought of Lily sleeping without fear for the first time in days, and of her mother, holding her like someone who had been returned a life that was nearly taken. He knew that the people responsible would face consequences through channels that moved carefully and slowly, and he also knew that those channels would not erase the threat entirely. There were names whispered in places that never made it into reports, and he had heard enough over the years to understand how easily lines could be crossed again if no one stood in the way. He parked at a lookout above the highway and cut the engine, letting the quiet surround him. For a long time, he sat there watching cars pass below, each one carrying lives that would never know how close they came to being torn apart. He reached into his jacket and unfolded the drawing Lily had given him, smoothing the creases with his thumb. It showed a house, two figures, and a sun drawn too large for the sky. It was simple, and it was everything. He realized then that doing nothing was no longer an option, and that relying solely on others to protect that fragile safety felt like turning his back again. The choice was not about anger or revenge, it was about prevention and responsibility. When he returned home, he pulled an old box from the back of a closet, one he had not opened in years. Inside were patches and tokens from a life he had been slowly leaving behind, each one a reminder of loyalty and consequence. He set them on the table and stared at them until the decision formed clear and steady. The next morning he rode to a quiet place outside town, where a few men he trusted gathered when things needed to be said plainly. They listened as he spoke, not dramatizing, not exaggerating, just laying out what had happened and what could still happen if no one paid attention. He told them about a child who had knocked on his door shaking and about a line that had been crossed in their backyard. There were no cheers, no raised voices, just nods and the quiet understanding of men who knew the cost of stepping in. When it was done, he stood and removed the vest from his shoulders, folding it carefully and placing it on the table. He said he was not asking for permission and not declaring war. He was choosing to step forward in a different way, one that put protection above reputation and prevention above pride. The silence that followed was heavy, and then one by one they nodded, some in respect, some in understanding, and some in relief. He left without the vest, feeling lighter and more exposed at the same time. Days later he received a message that Lily and her mother were settling into a temporary place, safe and watched over, and that Lily had asked when she could visit again. He smiled at that and sent back a simple answer that the door was open. He spent the afternoon fixing small things around the house, replacing a broken latch, tightening a loose step, making the space safer in quiet, practical ways. As evening fell, he sat on the porch watching the road, not as a guard, but as someone who had chosen to stay present. He understood that the decision he had made would change how others saw him and how he moved through the world, but he also understood that some changes were worth the cost. He had chosen to stand between fear and a child, not once, but for as long as it took, and that commitment felt more binding than any oath he had ever taken. The sun set, and the streetlights flickered on, and in that steady glow he felt a calm resolve settle in his chest. This was not an ending, it was a beginning shaped by choice and consequence, and the quiet knowledge that sometimes the most powerful thing a person could do was decide to stay and protect what mattered, even when the road ahead was uncertain. The weeks that followed unfolded quietly and deliberately, and the biker learned that real endings rarely arrived with noise or applause. They arrived in small, steady moments that proved themselves over time. Lily and her mother visited on a clear Saturday afternoon, the sound of their car in the driveway lighter than any engine he had ever heard. Lily stepped out first, holding a small backpack, her smile unguarded, now her eyes bright instead of searching. She ran up the path and stopped short only long enough to be sure, then wrapped her arms around him without hesitation. He returned the hug, carefully aware of how easily trust could still be broken and how precious it was that it had not been. Her mother followed, thanking him again, but this time the words carried peace instead of desperation. They spent the afternoon together doing ordinary things, Lily drawing at the table again, her mother helping in the kitchen, laughter slipping into the spaces where fear had once lived. The biker watched them from a distance, at times understanding that his role had changed from rescuer to something quieter and more lasting. When evening came, Lily asked if he would walk them to the car, and as they stood by the open door, she looked up and asked if he was still a hell angel. He considered the question and answered honestly that he had been, and that some parts of that life would always be part of him, but that what mattered most was what he chose to do now. Lily nodded as if that made perfect sense and told him that angels were supposed to protect people, not scare them. He smiled at that, accepting the simple wisdom without argument. As they drove away, he stood watching until the car disappeared down the road, then turned back toward his house, feeling a quiet certainty settle in his chest. The town slowly returned to its routines, and rumors faded into other conversations, but the biker remained attentive to the spaces where trouble liked to grow. He did not seek conflict, and he did not retreat from it either. He became someone people noticed in a different way, a steady presence, a door that stayed open, a line that did not move. Months later, he received a letter written in careful, uneven handwriting. It was from Lily thanking him for keeping his promise and telling him she slept better now and was not scared of storms anymore. At the bottom, her mother had added a note saying they were doing well, that Lily had started school again, and that she spoke often about the night everything changed and the man who answered the door. He folded the letter and placed it beside the drawing, keeping them together as reminders of the path he had chosen. 1. Evening, as he sat on the porch watching the sun sink low, a child from down the street rode past on a bicycle, laughing loudly, and for the first time, he did not feel the pull of the road calling him away. He understood then that the shock people spoke of was not in the confrontation or the danger, but in the choice that followed. A man known for fear had chosen protection. A door known for silence had opened. And a little girl who knocked shaking had changed the direction of a life simply by trusting that someone would answer. The biker leaned back, listening to the quiet of the neighborhood, and knew that whatever roads he traveled from here would be shaped by that night, not as a burden, but as a guide. Some angels did not save by force or fury. Some saved by staying, by choosing to stand still when the world needed a place to feel safe. And in that understanding, the story found its end, not with noise, but with resolve, and the certainty that one choice made in the dark could echo forward into the light. This emotional cinematic narrative follows a terrifying night when a frightened child seeks help and finds protection behind an unexpected door, leading to a powerful journey of courage, responsibility, and redemption, told in a voice-driven style perfect for listeners who love immersive drama. This story explores fear, trust, and the moment a hardened man chooses to stand between innocence and danger, creating one of the most moving Hell Angel stories ever shared. Through tense discoveries, quiet heroism, and lasting consequences, the listener is drawn into a world where protection matters more than reputation and choices shape destiny. Ideal for fans of real feeling storytelling, this is one of those Hell Angel stories that stays with you long after the final words. Blending suspense, heart, and moral strength, the narrative unfolds with realistic pacing, strong emotional beats, and a satisfying resolution, making it a standout among modern Hell Angel stories for audiences who value depth over spectacle. If you enjoy meaningful, character-driven audio experiences, this belongs in your collection of unforgettable Hell Angel stories, and serves as a reminder that sometimes the most shocking act is simply choosing to care, making it a defining example of why Hell Angel stories continue to resonate across generations.